Sarah Chen adjusted her worn backpack straps as she approached the security checkpoint at Denver International Airport. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her tired face, highlighting the exhaustion from her long journey. She had been traveling for nearly 18 hours, connecting through 3 different airports to reach her final destination. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her sneakers showed signs of countless miles walked. The security line moved slowly, filled with business travelers in crisp suits, families with crying children, and tourists clutching their boarding passes nervously. Sarah stood quietly, observing the controlled chaos around her. She had learned long ago to blend in, to become invisible in crowds. It was a skill that had served her well over the years. When her turn came, she placed her belongings in the gray plastic bins with practiced efficiency. Her laptop, a modest-looking device that appeared to be several years old, went into one bin. Her shoes, simple black sneakers that had seen better days, went into another. The TSA agent, a middle-aged man with a permanent scowl, barely glanced at her as she handed over her identification. Agent Rodriguez had been working the security checkpoint for over 8 years. He had seen every type of traveler imaginable, from nervous first-time flyers to seasoned business executives who moved through security with clockwork precision. When the young Asian woman handed him her ID, he gave it the same cursory glance he gave thousands of others each week. The identification card appeared ordinary enough at first glance. Standard government-issued format, proper security features, clear photograph. But something about the woman herself made him look twice. She was young, probably in her late 20s, dressed like a college student or budget traveler. Her appearance didn't match what he expected from someone traveling on official business. Purpose of travel, he asked routinely, though it wasn't technically required information. Work, Sarah replied simply, her voice calm and even. Rodriguez studied the ID more carefully now, his suspicion growing. The name read Sarah Chen, and the issuing agency was listed with a series of letters and numbers that meant nothing to him. Most government IDs he saw were straightforward: FBI, CIA, DA, ATF. This one seemed different, almost deliberately obscure. What kind of work? He pressed, holding onto the ID longer than usual. Sarah's expression remained neutral. I'm a systems analyst. The TSA supervisor, Janet Morrison, noticed the holdup and approached. Morrison had 23 years of experience in airport security, having started before the formation of the TSA itself. She had an eye for trouble and could spot suspicious behavior from across the terminal. The young woman standing at Rodriguez's station didn't appear threatening, but the extended interaction had caught her attention. Problem here? Morrison asked, stepping beside Rodriguez. Just checking this ID, Rodriguez replied, handing it over. Something seems off about it. Morrison examined the identification card under the bright security lights. The photo matched the woman standing before them, and all the security features appeared legitimate. But, like Rodriguez, something about the combination of the woman's appearance and the official nature of the ID struck her as unusual. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside for additional screening, Morrison announced. Sarah nodded without protest and moved to the designated area beside the main checkpoint. She had expected this might happen. Her appearance often drew second looks when combined with her government-issued credentials. It was an occupational hazard she had learned to navigate patiently. The additional screening area was a small space cordoned off by retractable barriers. Other travelers glanced over curiously as they passed through the main line. Sarah stood calmly, her hands at her sides, while Morrison made a phone call to verify her identification. Morrison dialed the number listed on the back of the ID card. These verification calls were routine for unfamiliar government credentials, though she had never seen this particular format before. The call connected after several rings, and she was greeted by an automated system. Please state the identification number and nature of your inquiry, the computerized voice prompted. Morrison read the numbers and letters printed on Sarah's ID, explaining that she was conducting a routine verification at airport security. There was a brief pause before the system responded. Please hold for transfer to appropriate personnel. While Morrison waited on hold, Rodriguez continued processing other travelers, though he kept glancing back at the young woman standing patiently in the screening area. A few passengers in line had begun to notice the delay and were craning their necks to see what was happening. "What's taking so long?" complained a businessman in an expensive suit who was running late for his flight. "Just routine security procedures, sir," Rodriguez replied diplomatically. The hold music continued for nearly 5 minutes before a human voice came on the line. Morrison explained the situation again, providing Sarah's name and identification number. "One moment please," the voice said. "I need to transfer you to the appropriate verification department." Another hold, another transfer. Morrison was beginning to grow impatient. Most government ID verifications took less than 2 minutes. This was turning into an extended process that was backing up the security line. Sarah remained motionless during the wait, her expression unchanged. She had been through similar situations before, though usually not quite this lengthy. The verification process for her credentials was necessarily complex due to the sensitive nature of her work, but she understood the importance of maintaining security protocols. Finally, Morrison heard a new voice on the phone. This one sounded more authoritative, with a crisp military bearing that came through even over the telephone. "This is command verification. Please provide the identification details again." Morrison repeated the information for the third time, her patience wearing thin. The security checkpoint was getting busier as the morning rush of flights began, and she needed to resolve this situation quickly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to place this call on speakerphone," the military voice instructed. "And, please ensure that the individual in question can hear the verification clearly." This was unusual. Morrison had never been asked to put a verification call on speaker before. She looked at Sarah questioningly. "Is that acceptable to you, ma'am?" Morrison asked. Sarah nodded once. "That's fine." Morrison activated the speaker function on her phone and set it on the small desk in the screening area. Several other TSA agents had gathered around, curious about the extended verification process. The businessman who had been complaining was now openly staring, as were several other passengers in the main line. "This is command verification for United States Special Operations Command," the voice announced clearly over the speaker. "The identification you are examining belongs to Dr. Sarah Chen, Senior Systems Analyst, Cyber Operations Division. Dr. Chen is currently traveling under official orders and maintains the highest level of security clearance." The speaker continued, "Dr. Chen is authorized to carry classified materials and equipment. Her credentials are valid and current. Please expedite her processing and extend all appropriate courtesies." A stunned silence fell over the immediate area. Morrison stared at the phone, then at Sarah, then back at the phone. Rodriguez had stopped processing the line entirely and was listening with his mouth slightly open. The businessman who had been complaining was now looking at Sarah with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Can you repeat that?" Morrison asked weakly. "Dr. Sarah Chen is a senior analyst with United States Special Operations Command," the voice repeated patiently. "She is traveling on official business under classified orders. Is there anything else you need to verify?" Morrison looked at Sarah with new eyes. The young woman who had appeared to be a budget traveler or college student was actually a high-ranking government analyst with top-secret clearance. Her modest appearance had been completely deceiving. "No, sir." "Thank you for the verification," Morrison managed to say. "Have a good day," the voice replied before disconnecting. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Other travelers in the security line were straining to hear what had just happened. Word was beginning to spread that something significant was occurring at the checkpoint. Sarah Chen, who had remained perfectly calm throughout the entire process, finally spoke. "May I proceed to my gate now?" Morrison snapped back to attention. "Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry for the delay, Dr. Chen." She handed back the identification with noticeably more respect than she had shown before. As Sarah collected her belongings and walked toward her gate, conversations erupted behind her. The businessman who had been complaining was now telling anyone who would listen about witnessing a real-life secret agent at security. Other passengers were speculating about what kind of classified mission could bring such a high-ranking operative through a civilian airport. Rodriguez watched Sarah disappear into the crowd of travelers, shaking his head in amazement. In 8 years of airport security work, he had never encountered anything quite like this. The woman had looked like any other young traveler, but her credentials revealed an entirely different reality. Morrison was already on the phone with her supervisor, reporting the incident. While nothing had gone wrong procedurally, encounters with Special Operations Command personnel were rare enough to warrant documentation. The supervisor listened with interest, asking several questions about the verification process and Sarah's behavior during the screening. "Did she seem upset about the delay?" the supervisor asked. "Not at all," Morrison replied. "She was completely professional. Almost like she expected it to happen." Meanwhile, Sarah had found her gate and taken a seat near the boarding area. She pulled out her laptop and began working on what appeared to be routine documents, though anyone with the proper security clearance would have recognized the complex algorithmic formulas displayed on her screen. Her work dealt with cybersecurity systems that protected critical military infrastructure, work that required both advanced technical skills and the highest levels of security clearance. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her handler. "Heard you had some excitement at security. Everything proceeding normally?" Sarah typed back quickly, "Standard verification process. No issues. ETA unchanged." She put her phone away and continued working, ignoring the occasional curious glances from other passengers who had heard about the incident at security. This was the reality of her profession, a constant balancing act between maintaining operational security and navigating the normal world where her appearance and credentials often seemed at odds with each other. The boarding announcement came 45 minutes later. Sarah packed up her laptop and joined the line of passengers, just another face in the crowd heading to their next destination. But, for the TSA agents who had processed her identification, and for the passengers who had witnessed the verification call, she had provided a glimpse into a hidden world where appearances could be deceiving and the most ordinary-looking people might be involved in the most extraordinary work. As her plane taxied away from the gate, Sarah looked out the window at the sprawling airport below. In a few hours, she would be at her destination, ready to begin another classified assignment that most people would never know existed. But, first, she had successfully navigated the civilian world once again, leaving behind a small group of people who would probably never forget the day they met a real Special Operations Command analyst. The secure facility in Virginia looked like any other corporate office building from the outside. Glass windows reflected the morning sun, and well-dressed professionals moved through the lobby carrying coffee cups and briefcases. But, 3 levels underground, behind multiple layers of security checkpoints and electromagnetic shielding, Sarah Chen sat in a windowless conference room that contained some of the most classified information in the United States government. Colonel James Patterson reviewed the mission brief one final time before Sarah's arrival. At 52, Patterson had spent over half his life in various intelligence and special operations roles. He had coordinated missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and dozens of countries that would never appear in official records. But, the situation developing in Eastern Europe represented something entirely new in his experience. The conference room's walls were lined with screens displaying real-time intelligence feeds from around the globe. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, financial transaction patterns, and network intrusion attempts painted a complex picture of emerging threats to national security. At the center of it all was a cybersecurity breach that had the potential to compromise critical military systems across multiple allied nations. Sarah entered the briefing room at exactly 0800 hours. She had changed from her casual travel clothes into more professional attire, a dark blue blazer, pressed slacks, and low heels. But, even in business dress, she maintained the understated appearance that had served her so well at the airport. Anyone glancing at her would see a competent professional, not someone with access to the nation's most sensitive cyber warfare capabilities. "Dr. Chen, welcome," Colonel Patterson greeted her, standing as she entered. "I trust your travel went smoothly?" "Minor delay at security," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "Nothing unusual." Patterson had read the incident report from Denver International Airport during his morning briefing. The TSA verification call had been routine from his perspective. Sarah's credentials were legitimate and her clearance was properly documented. But he understood why civilian security personnel might be surprised by the disconnect between her appearance and her actual role. "Please, have a seat," Patterson gestured to the chair across from his position at the conference table. "We have a complex situation developing that requires your particular expertise." Two other personnel were already seated at the table. Major Lisa Rodriguez from Army Cyber Command had been tracking the network intrusions for the past 6 weeks. Her background in computer forensics and digital warfare made her an essential part of the analysis team. Dr. Michael Kowalski from the National Security Agency brought expertise in cryptographic systems and communication interception that would be crucial for understanding the scope of the breach. The situation began 3 months ago with what appeared to be routine probing of our NATO communication networks. Patterson began activating the main display screen. A world map appeared, showing connection points and data flow patterns across Europe and North America. Red indicators marked areas where unauthorized access attempts had been detected. Initially, our analysts categorized these as standard reconnaissance activities, Major Rodriguez continued. Similar to what we see from various state actors on a regular basis. Low-level attempts to identify vulnerabilities, test response times, map network architectures. Nothing that appeared to pose an immediate threat. Sarah studied the display carefully, noting the pattern and timing of the intrusion attempts. Her experience in cyber operations had taught her to look for subtleties that others might miss, patterns within patterns, seemingly random activities that revealed underlying coordination and planning. 2 weeks ago, that assessment changed dramatically, Dr. Kowalski added. We discovered that the probing activities were far more sophisticated than they initially appeared. The attackers had been using advanced techniques to mask their true capabilities and objectives. The display changed to show detailed network diagrams and code samples. Sarah recognized immediately that she was looking at evidence of state-sponsored cyber warfare at the highest levels of sophistication. The attack methods being employed required resources and expertise that only a handful of organizations worldwide possessed. The breakthrough came when we realized that the attackers weren't trying to steal information, Patterson explained. They were mapping our defensive systems, learning how we detect and respond to intrusions. More concerning, they appear to be positioning themselves to disrupt communications during a critical operational window. Sarah leaned forward, her analytical mind already processing the implications. You believe they're preparing for a coordinated attack designed to blind our communication systems during a specific time period? Exactly, Patterson confirmed. Intelligence indicates that several hostile actors are planning synchronized activities across Eastern Europe within the next 30 days. If they can disrupt our communication networks at the critical moment, it would severely compromise our ability to coordinate defensive responses. The screens around the room displayed additional evidence: financial transactions linking to known terrorist organizations, movement of personnel across international borders, and procurement of materials that could be used for various types of attacks. The cyber component was just one piece of a larger, more dangerous puzzle. Your mission, Dr. Chen, is to penetrate the attacker's own network systems and determine the exact timing and scope of their planned operations, Patterson continued. We need to understand not just when they plan to strike, but specifically how they intend to disrupt our communications. Major Rodriguez activated another display showing technical specifications for the systems that had been compromised. We've identified 17 different network entry points that the attackers have been using. Most appear to be legitimate communication nodes that have been compromised through sophisticated malware injection. The challenge, Dr. Kowalski added, is that their own communication systems are protected by encryption methods we haven't seen before. Standard decryption approaches have been unsuccessful. We need someone who can think outside conventional parameters. Sarah had built her reputation precisely on her ability to approach cybersecurity challenges from unexpected angles. While many analysts focused on defeating security systems through brute force computational methods, she specialized in understanding the human and organizational factors that created vulnerabilities in even the most sophisticated networks. What assets do I have available for this operation? She asked. Patterson activated a secure tablet and slid it across the table. You'll have access to our most advanced penetration testing tools, including several systems that are still in experimental phases. Additionally, you'll be working with a small team of specialists who can provide real-time support for different aspects of the operation. The tablet displayed profiles of the team members she would be working with. Each had extensive experience in cyber operations, but their specific skills complemented different aspects of the mission. One specialist focused on social engineering techniques, another on hardware exploitation, a third on real-time network analysis. Timeline? Sarah asked, scrolling through the technical specifications on the tablet. Intelligence suggests the coordinated attack will occur within 15 days, Patterson replied. We need actionable intelligence about their plans at least 72 hours before they implement, which gives you approximately 10 days to penetrate their systems and extract the necessary information. Sarah nodded, her mind already formulating initial approaches to the problem. The challenge was significant. She would need to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in systems designed by highly skilled adversaries who were specifically anticipating counterintelligence efforts. There's one additional complication, Major Rodriguez added. Our analysis suggests that the attackers have infiltrated at least one of our own communication networks. They may have access to some of our operational planning and response protocols. This information changed the entire dynamic of the mission. Sarah would not only need to penetrate enemy systems but also operate under the assumption that her own activities might be monitored by the same adversaries she was trying to defeat. How confident are we in the security of this facility and our planning process? Sarah asked. This location and all personnel in this room have been verified through multiple security protocols, Patterson assured her. But once you begin operational activities, we have to assume that some of your actions may be observed by hostile actors. Dr. Kowalski brought up a final display showing the potential consequences if the mission failed. Economic disruption, compromised military operations, and potential loss of life across multiple countries painted a sobering picture of what was at stake. The attackers appear to be coordinating with terrorist cells that are planning physical attacks on infrastructure targets, he explained. If they can blind our communication systems at the critical moment, emergency response coordination could be severely compromised. Sarah studied the intelligence estimates showing potential casualty numbers and economic impact. The scale of the threat was enormous, but the technical challenge of the mission was equally daunting. She would need to outmaneuver adversaries who had been planning their operations for months while operating under the assumption that they might be watching her every move. I'll need direct access to the compromised network nodes you've identified, she said finally. And real-time intelligence updates as new information becomes available. Arranged, Patterson confirmed. You'll also have secure communication channels to request additional resources as needed. This operation has the highest priority authorization. The briefing continued for another hour, covering technical details, communication protocols, and contingency plans. Sarah absorbed every piece of information while mentally constructing her approach to the mission. The challenge was unlike anything she had faced before, but her experience had prepared her to operate in exactly these kinds of high-stakes, complex environments. As the meeting concluded, Patterson handed Sarah an additional secure device. Your transportation to the operational site has been arranged. You'll be working from a facility that provides direct access to the communication networks you need to penetrate. Sarah pocketed the device and gathered her materials. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from appearing to be an ordinary traveler at an airport security checkpoint to being briefed on one of the most critical cybersecurity operations in recent memory. The contrast was stark, but it represented the reality of her professional life, moving seamlessly between the visible world and the hidden realm of national security operations. Dr. Chen, Colonel Patterson said as she prepared to leave, I don't need to emphasize how critical this mission is to national security. Understood, sir, Sarah replied. I'll have preliminary findings within 48 hours. As she left the briefing room and made her way through the facility's security checkpoints, Sarah's mind was already working through the technical challenges ahead. The next 10 days would test every skill she had developed over years of cyber operations training and field experience. But she had faced impossible odds before and found ways to succeed where others had failed. The Secure Operations Center was housed in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Baltimore. From the outside, it appeared to be another abandoned industrial building in a district full of similar structures. Inside, however, banks of sophisticated computer equipment hummed quietly while processing massive amounts of digital information. Sarah arrived at the facility at 2100 hours, 3 hours after her mission briefing had concluded. The operations center had been specifically configured for her mission. Multiple high-speed internet connections provided redundant access to global communication networks. Specialized hardware allowed her to monitor network traffic in real time while simultaneously testing various penetration techniques. Most importantly, the facility was completely isolated from official government networks, ensuring that any counter-surveillance by hostile actors would not compromise other operations. Technical specialist Marcus Webb met Sarah at the facility entrance. Webb had 15 years of experience in cyber operations and had personally configured the equipment she would be using. His expertise in network architecture and real-time analysis made him an invaluable support resource for the mission. Dr. Chen, welcome to our digital playground, Webb said, leading her through the facility. We've set up everything according to your specifications from the briefing. The main operations room contains 6 large monitors arranged in a semicircle around a central workstation. Each monitor could display different aspects of the network analysis she would be conducting. Real-time traffic flows, code analysis windows, penetration testing results, and communication intercept data could all be viewed simultaneously. The system is configured to monitor 17 different network entry points that we've identified as being compromised by the attackers, Webb explained, activating the displays. We can observe their activities without them knowing we're watching, at least initially. Sarah took her position at the central workstation and began familiarizing herself with the interface. The complexity of the system was impressive. She could monitor network activities across multiple countries while simultaneously launching her own penetration attempts against hostile systems. Her first task was to establish a baseline understanding of the attacker's capabilities and methods. For the past 3 hours, she had been mentally preparing her approach based on the briefing materials. Now it was time to begin the actual investigation. Show me the traffic patterns from the past 72 hours, Sarah requested. Webb activated a data visualization tool that displayed network activity as flowing streams of colored light on the main monitor. Each color represented different types of data transmission, and the thickness of the streams indicated volume. The pattern that emerged was both beautiful and deeply concerning. The attackers were communicating using sophisticated methods that disguised their actual message content within seemingly legitimate internet traffic. Email attachments, social media uploads, and even online gaming activities were being used to pass encrypted instructions between different cells of their organization. Steganography, Sarah murmured, recognizing the technique. They're hiding their real communications inside innocent-looking digital activities. We suspected as much, Webb confirmed. But we haven't been able to identify the specific encoding methods they're using. Standard analysis tools haven't found any hidden content. Sarah began her investigation by focusing on timing patterns rather than content. Even if the attackers were successfully hiding their message content, the timing of their communications might reveal organizational structure and planning sequences. She wrote a custom analysis program that could identify subtle correlations between seemingly unrelated network activities. 3 hours into her work, the first breakthrough came. The analysis program identified a pattern where social media uploads from 17 different accounts always occurred within specific time windows. The content of the uploads appeared completely random: vacation photos, food pictures, mundane status updates. But the timing was too precise to be coincidental. There, Sarah pointed to a timeline visualization showing the correlated activities. Every 48 hours, all 17 accounts post something within a 6-hour window. The content doesn't matter, they're using the posting activity itself as a communication signal. Webb studied the pattern with growing excitement. So the actual message isn't in what they post, but in the fact that they all post within that time frame? Partially, Sarah confirmed. But there's more. Look at the file sizes of the uploaded images. A new display showed the technical details of each uploaded file. While the images appeared to be random photographs, their file sizes formed a mathematical sequence that was clearly intentional. The attackers were embedding numerical codes in the file size metadata. Brilliant, Webb admitted. They're using multiple layers of steganography. The timing signals coordinate activities, and the file sizes contain encrypted instructions. Sarah was already working on the next phase of her investigation. Understanding their communication methods was important, but the mission required her to penetrate their actual planning systems and extract information about the upcoming coordinated attack. I need to trace these communication signals back to their source systems, Sarah said, initiating a series of network mapping procedures. If I can identify the servers they're using for coordination, I might be able to access their actual planning documents. The network tracing process required careful attention to avoid triggering security alerts on the attacker's systems. Sarah used a technique called passive reconnaissance, where she observed network traffic patterns without actually attempting to connect to hostile systems. This allowed her to map the structure of their communication network without alerting them to her investigation. Over the next 6 hours, a picture began to emerge of a sophisticated international organization with communication nodes in at least 12 different countries. The central coordination appeared to be handled by servers located in Eastern Europe, but identifying the exact locations would require more active investigation techniques. At 0600 hours, Sarah decided to attempt her first direct penetration of one of the attacker's peripheral systems. She chose a communication relay server that appeared to have less sophisticated security protections than the central coordination systems. This is where things get dangerous, Sarah warned Webb. Once I start active penetration attempts, they might realize someone is investigating their network. All monitoring equipment is ready, Webb confirmed. If they start tracing back toward us, we'll know immediately. Sarah launched her first penetration attempt using a custom-designed malware package that could exploit recently discovered vulnerabilities in common server software. The attack was designed to appear like routine criminal hacking rather than sophisticated government cyber operations. 45 minutes later, she had successfully gained access to the peripheral server. The system contained communication logs that provided valuable intelligence about the attacker's organizational structure. More importantly, it revealed that they were indeed planning coordinated activities for a specific date just 11 days in the future. Got something, Sarah announced, displaying intercepted communication logs on the main monitor. They're calling it Operation Blackout, and it's scheduled for exactly 11 days from today. The communication logs revealed that the cyber component of their plan was designed to disrupt communications across 7 different countries simultaneously. Emergency response networks, military communication systems, and civilian infrastructure control systems would all be targeted during a 6-hour window. The physical attacks are coordinated with the cyber disruption, Sarah continued, analyzing the intercepted data. They want to blind emergency response capabilities right when physical attacks begin across multiple locations. Webb was already preparing secure communication links to relay this intelligence back to Colonel Patterson and the mission command structure. But Sarah knew her work was far from complete. She had confirmed the existence and timing of the planned attack, but she still needed to identify the specific methods they would use to disrupt communication systems. I need to get deeper into their network, Sarah said, preparing for the next phase of her investigation. The peripheral servers only contain coordination messages. The actual technical plans for the cyber attacks will be stored on their central systems. Attempting to penetrate the central coordination systems would be significantly more dangerous. These systems would have sophisticated security protections and active monitoring capabilities. If the attackers detected her investigation, they might accelerate their timeline or modify their plans, making the intelligence she had gathered obsolete. Sarah spent the next 4 hours developing a specialized penetration strategy designed specifically for the central systems. Rather than attempting direct network attacks, she would exploit weaknesses in the human and organizational aspects of their security. The breakthrough came when she realized that the attackers were using legitimate cloud computing services for some of their coordination activities. By identifying the specific services they were using and exploiting vulnerabilities in the account management systems, she could potentially gain access to their planning documents without directly attacking their own servers. Cloud service infiltration, Sarah explained to Webb as she prepared the new attack strategy. Instead of trying to break into their servers, I'm going to trick their cloud service provider into giving me access to their accounts. The technique required her to forge digital credentials that would convince the cloud service provider that she was a legitimate system administrator conducting routine security maintenance. If successful, she would have direct access to whatever files and communications the attackers were storing in cloud-based systems. At 1,400 hours, Sarah launched the cloud infiltration attack. The process required real-time interaction with the cloud service provider's security systems, making it impossible to predict exactly how long the operation would take. She worked methodically through multiple layers of authentication and verification processes. 3 hours later, she was inside the attacker's cloud storage systems. What she found exceeded her most optimistic expectations. Detailed technical plans for the cyber attacks, complete lists of target systems, timeline schedules, and even backup plans in case their initial attacks failed. "This is everything," Sarah said, downloading terabytes of intelligence data. "Complete specifications for how they plan to disrupt our communication networks, plus detailed information about the physical attacks they're coordinating." The intelligence revealed that the attackers had been planning their operation for over 18 months. They had identified vulnerabilities in communication systems across multiple countries and developed sophisticated malware specifically designed to exploit these weaknesses. Most concerning, they had backup plans and alternate attack methods in case their primary approach was detected or blocked. But Sarah had found something even more valuable than the attack plans themselves. The downloaded files contained communication records that revealed the identities of key coordinators, funding sources, and international connections that law enforcement and intelligence agencies could use to disrupt the entire organization. As she completed the data extraction and began preparing to disconnect from the hostile systems, Sarah noticed unusual activity on the network monitoring displays. The attackers' security systems were beginning to show signs that they might have detected unauthorized access. "Time to go," Sarah announced, initiating emergency disconnection procedures. "They're starting to realize someone has been in their systems." Webb monitored the network connections as Sarah carefully covered her tracks and disconnected from the attackers' systems. The operation had been successful beyond their initial objectives, but the urgency of the situation had increased dramatically. Sarah now had complete intelligence about Operation Blackout, but she also knew that the attackers might accelerate their timeline if they suspected their plans had been compromised. The next phase of the mission would focus on using this intelligence to prevent the attacks from succeeding while maintaining the appearance that their plans remained secret. The emergency briefing at the Pentagon began at 0300 hours, just 16 hours after Sarah had successfully extracted the complete Operation Blackout intelligence. Representatives from 7 different government agencies filled the secure conference room, each bringing specialized expertise needed to coordinate the massive defensive operation that would be required to counter the imminent threat. General Patricia Morrison, director of the Joint Cyber Operations Center, reviewed the intelligence package that Sarah had compiled during her infiltration mission. The scope of the planned attacks was staggering: coordinated cyber and physical assaults across multiple countries, designed to cripple communication systems during critical emergency response periods. Dr. Chen's intelligence indicates that Operation Blackout will commence in exactly 9 days and 14 hours, General Morrison announced to the assembled officials. "The attackers have been planning this operation for 18 months and have backup plans for every contingency we might normally employ." Sarah sat at the briefing table alongside the senior officials, a stark contrast to her appearance just days earlier when TSA agents had questioned her credentials. Now she was being consulted as the primary intelligence source for one of the most significant counter-terrorism operations in recent memory. The cyber component targets communication infrastructures in 7 countries simultaneously, Sarah explained, activating displays showing the attackers' technical plans. They've developed custom malware specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities in emergency response networks, military communication systems, and civilian infrastructure control systems. FBI Director Robert Hayes studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The physical attacks coordinated with the cyber disruption would target critical infrastructure in major urban areas. Shopping centers, transportation hubs, and government facilities were all on the target list, with timing designed to maximize casualties during peak occupancy periods. How confident are we in the accuracy of this intelligence? Director Hayes asked. Extremely high confidence, Sarah replied. The files were extracted directly from their central coordination systems. We have their complete operational plans, including detailed technical specifications, personnel assignments, and timeline schedules. CIA Deputy Director Amanda Foster was reviewing international intelligence connections revealed in the extracted data. The operation involved terrorist cells in 12 different countries, with funding and coordination provided by state actors who wanted to destabilize Western alliance relationships. The international scope complicates our response options, Deputy Director Foster observed. We need to coordinate defensive actions across multiple countries while maintaining operational security. If the attackers realize we've compromised their plans, they might accelerate the timeline or modify their approach. Sarah had anticipated this challenge during her intelligence analysis. The attackers had demonstrated sophisticated operational security throughout their planning process. Detecting their plans was only the first step. Countering them required careful coordination to avoid triggering contingency protocols that could make the situation even more dangerous. I recommend a layered defensive strategy, Sarah proposed. We implement security measures that appear to be routine maintenance and security updates rather than specific responses to a known threat. This allows us to close their attack vectors without alerting them to our knowledge of their plans. General Morrison activated a secure communication link to Allied military commanders in the affected countries. Coordinating defensive actions across different time zones, languages, and command structures would be challenging under normal circumstances. With only 9 days to implement comprehensive countermeasures, the timeline was extremely compressed. Dr. Chen, what specific actions do we need to take to neutralize the cyber attack components? General Morrison asked. Sarah had prepared detailed technical recommendations during her flight back from the operations center. The attackers' malware was sophisticated, but her analysis had identified several critical vulnerabilities in their attack methodology that could be exploited to render their cyber weapons ineffective. The attackers are relying on specific software vulnerabilities that can be patched through emergency security updates, Sarah explained. If we coordinate the timing carefully, we can close their attack vectors within a 48-hour window without making it obvious that we know about their specific plans. National Security Advisor Dr. Elizabeth Warren was coordinating with international allies through secure diplomatic channels. The intelligence that Sarah had extracted was being shared with friendly governments under strict operational security protocols. Each country would need to implement defensive measures without alerting domestic media or civilian populations to the scope of the threat. International coordination is proceeding smoothly, Dr. Warren reported. Allied governments understand the urgency and are implementing recommended security measures. However, maintaining operational security becomes more challenging as more people become aware of the situation. Sarah knew from her cyber operations experience that information security was always the weakest link in complex operations. Every additional person who learned about Operation Blackout increased the risk that information might leak to the attackers through compromised communication channels or human error. I recommend implementing compartmentalized security protocols, Sarah suggested. Each participating organization only receives the specific information they need to implement their part of the defensive strategy. This minimizes the risk of information leakage while maintaining operational effectiveness. The briefing continued for 3 hours as detailed defensive plans were coordinated across multiple agencies and countries. Sarah provided technical consultation on cybersecurity measures while senior officials handled diplomatic coordination, resource allocation, and timeline management. As the meeting concluded, General Morrison assigned Sarah to lead the technical coordination team that would monitor the implementation of defensive measures over the next 9 days. Her expertise in cyber operations and intimate knowledge of the attackers' plans made her the logical choice to oversee the complex technical aspects of the defensive operation. Dr. Chen, you'll be working from the Joint Cyber Operations Center for the duration of this operation, General Morrison instructed. We need real-time monitoring of both our defensive implementation and any changes in the attackers' behavior. Over the following week, Sarah coordinated one of the most complex cyber defense operations in military history. Software updates were deployed across thousands of systems in 7 different countries. Network security protocols were enhanced without disrupting normal operations. Communication systems were hardened against the specific attack methods that the terrorists had planned to employ. The most challenging aspect was monitoring the attackers' own communications to detect any signs that they suspected their plans had been compromised. Sarah worked 18-hour days analyzing intercepted communications and network traffic patterns, looking for any indication that Operation Blackout might be modified or accelerated. Day 6, no changes in their communication patterns, Sarah reported during the daily briefing. They appear to be proceeding with their original timeline and methodology. The defensive preparations were proceeding ahead of schedule across all participating countries. Military communication systems had been upgraded with new security protocols. Emergency response networks had implemented additional redundancy and backup systems. Critical infrastructure control systems had been isolated and protected against the specific malware that the attackers had developed. But Sarah knew that the most critical phase would come in the final 48 hours before the planned attacks. If the terrorists detected the defensive preparations, they might attempt to implement backup plans or accelerated timelines that could still cause significant damage. 72 hours remaining, Sarah announced during the morning briefing on day 6. All defensive systems are in place, but we need to maintain vigilance for any changes in the attacker's behavior. The final test came on day 8, when the attackers began their preliminary network reconnaissance activities. These were routine checks designed to verify that their target systems remained vulnerable to the planned attacks. Sarah monitored these activities in real time, watching as the attackers' scanning attempts encountered the hardened security measures that had been implemented. "They're discovering that their attack vectors have been closed," Sarah reported with tension in her voice. "Their reconnaissance is showing that the vulnerabilities they plan to exploit are no longer accessible." This was the critical moment. If the attackers realized that their cyber attack plans had been neutralized, they might attempt to accelerate their physical attacks or implement backup plans that could still cause casualties. For 6 hours, Sarah monitored the attackers' communications as they attempted to understand why their network reconnaissance was failing. Internal discussions revealed confusion and disagreement about whether to proceed with the original plans or implement contingency protocols. They're debating whether the security changes are routine maintenance or evidence that their plans have been compromised, Sarah reported. "The operational security measures we implemented are working, they can't determine whether we know about Operation Blackout." The resolution came during hour 18 of the final day. Intercepted communications revealed that the terrorist coordinators had decided that the security changes were routine and that Operation Blackout should proceed as planned. They would discover too late that every aspect of their cyber attack had been neutralized. At exactly 0600 hours on the planned attack date, the terrorists launched Operation Blackout. Their sophisticated malware encountered the hardened security systems and was immediately blocked and contained. Physical attack teams found themselves facing coordinated law enforcement responses in all 7 target countries. Within 6 hours, the entire operation had been dismantled and key personnel captured. Sarah monitored the failed attack from the Joint Cyber Operations Center, watching as months of terrorist planning crumbled against the defensive measures that had been implemented based on her intelligence gathering. Not a single communication system was compromised. No infrastructure was damaged. No casualties occurred from any of the planned attacks. Operation Blackout has been completely neutralized, General Morrison announced during the post-operation briefing. Dr. Chen's intelligence gathering and the coordinated international response prevented what could have been one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in recent history. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself back in an airport security line, traveling to her next assignment. She appeared once again to be an ordinary traveler, but the TSA agents processing her identification now had her credentials flagged in their system as requiring expedited and respectful handling. Agent Rodriguez, the same TSA officer who had questioned her credentials weeks earlier, was working the checkpoint when she approached. He recognized her immediately and processed her identification with newfound respect. "Have a safe trip, Dr." Chen, he said, handing back her ID with a slight nod of acknowledgement. As Sarah walked toward her gate, she reflected on the mission that had brought her from a questioned traveler to the key intelligence operative who had prevented a major international terrorist attack. Her unassuming appearance continued to be her greatest operational asset, allowing her to move through the world while carrying some of the most sensitive responsibilities in national security. The passengers around her had no idea that the quiet woman with the modest backpack had recently saved thousands of lives and prevented a coordinated attack that could have changed the course of international relations. For Sarah, this anonymity was not just professional cover, it was the foundation of her ability to protect a world that would never know her name or understand the true scope of the threat she helped to neutralize. Her next assignment was already waiting in her secure communication device. Another threat, another mission, another opportunity to use her unique combination of technical expertise and operational invisibility to protect national security interests. The work never ended, but neither did her commitment to the hidden war being fought in the digital shadows of an increasingly connected world.